So this is The City and the Stars by Arthur C. Clarke. It's interesting because it is a 1955 rewrite of his debut novel, which came out in 1948. So he'd written this novel, his first novel, in 1948. In 1955, I think it was, 1956, he basically took the narrative, rewrote it, changed some things around, based on what he felt like he knew, or how he grew from writing, and came up with this novel. It's interesting as a product of its time, I guess. Sci-fi in the 50s is kind of a niche thing. Maybe it's interesting to read what people thought of the future to be, but it's also hard to read sci-fi that is kind of older, because it's almost an iterative process. Someone will come up with an idea, which at the time of publication would be a great sci-fi idea. Like, wow, we hadn't thought of this before. This is so neat. But over the decades, that idea will be cannibalized and reiterated and built upon, so that it can almost become a trope at some points, which makes it hard to go back and read 70-year-old sci-fi, because you're like, okay, well, at the time this was really like mind-blowing stuff, but I've seen this done to death at this point. So that's that. But even beyond that, I found that I don't think this was a really well-written book. There were, and I'll get to this, there were a number of points in the book where I'm like, this should have been the ending. You could have had the ending here, but no, he had to go on, and the story went on and on and on. And I mean, it's not even a long story, but the narrative could have been wrapped up, and it was just sort of more exposition and more continuing a story that could have ended way earlier. So the story starts in a city called Diaspar, which is sort of a utopia, an artistic utopia, where people live for 1,000 years in the body of, like, say, a 20-year-old, or whatever your peak, maybe 30-year-old. You don't age. Your first 20 years of life, you're created fully adult, and you have no memories of previous lives. You lived sort of 20 years of learning, of experiencing sort of a childhood, even though it's not a childhood, because you're fully adult upon birth, and you are fully cognizant and mature. But you live 20 years in sort of a naive bliss, and then at your 20th year, you get your memories back from your previous lives. And then you live for 1,000 years, and then after 1,000 years, you can edit your memories, choose what you want to keep, what you want to get rid of, and then you sort of go back into the memory banks of a computer. Your neural pattern is stored, so that at some point, millennia into the future, you can be recreated and go through this process again. And like I said, 20 years after that recreation, you get your memories back, and you can continue on. So it's a sort of immortality without stagnation. Eternity, but with slight change. It's a really cool idea, and I'm like, oh, okay, neat city. I like the idea. What do people do during these 1,000 years? Well, they create arts. They study mathematics and philosophy, and it's a very utopian society. Everyone's a genius. Everyone's beautiful. They just live and enjoy life, but they're contained to this one city, and they have this psychological fear of anything outside of the city and leaving the city, like a deep inbuilt phobia of going beyond the city. And so that's where we have our main character, Alvin, because of course his name is Alvin, because this was written in the 50s, who, he's different. Of course he's different, but he's different because he doesn't have this inbuilt fear. He, in fact, has what I see as a more human urge to explore beyond and to see what's outside the city, which sort of frightens his friends and whatnot. And the story starts around his 20th year, and the people come to him and say, okay, and this is normally when you'd get all your memories back from your previous lives, but it turns out you don't have any previous lives. For whatever reason, the central computer, which runs this, it's like this massive AI that runs the whole city, has sort of created you on its own. Maybe it's used a neural pattern from someone or something in the past. We don't really know, but we just know that this is the first time you've ever been born into this city, and it's sort of a big deal for this city. Once every 100 million years or something like that, someone is born that has no previous existence, sort of a new person. And why this is the case, it could have been whoever programmed the central computer back a billion years ago when the city was founded, because the city is a billion years old. And it could just be a way to sort of shake things up, sort of add something new into the mix. But anyway, so there's this Alvin guy. There's also this jester character who is sort of serves a similar role of not being a criminal, but there's a like every society needs sort of crime or needs someone to go against the grain and shake things up, otherwise like to prevent stagnation and what's the word, anyways. So there's this jester character who talks to Alvin and helps him find a way out of the city, and that's sort of, it feels like the main thing is going to be him finding out what's outside of the city, and then sort of introducing the city to, hey, there's more to life than just this glorious utopia. Anyway, so there's this jester character. A lot of these characters, like the jester, seem to be main characters, but end up having just a short role that's cut short at some point. Like there's this girl, I can't remember her name, Alistra, or something like that, who is like Alvin's girlfriend or partner of some romantic partner of some type, and it seems like she's gonna have some role to play in something, but eventually she just at one point realizes, oh, Alvin's left the city. Well, I guess he's moved on, and then she's just never seen again for like the second half of the book. Never mentioned once. It's just bizarre. So anyway, so Alvin's desperate to try and find a way out of the city, and he ends up finding a way that, like, in the center of the city, there's this statue to one of the creators of the city, and it turns out that there's an underground subway underneath this statue that takes him to this forested area outside the city. And he's like, why is there a forest here? I thought there was this desert and nothing outside the city. Turns out there's this forest. He finds people there. Now, Diaspar has been cut off from the rest of the universe for 1 billion years, and yet he finds people who speak the same language and same dialect as him, who are biologically the same as him, which is far-fetched to say the least. But anyway, so he finds these people in this place called Lice, or Lice. I think Lice, like Greek for to kill or to die. Anyways, but that doesn't make sense why that would be that. Anyway, so in Lice, or Lice, there is sort of a different way of living. So we had the sort of urban, technologically super advanced society of Diaspar, and then we have people living in these sort of communal small villages, low population spread throughout this forest. These people also have telepathic powers, because you can't have a sci-fi in the 50s without having telepathic powers. They also are not immortal. They seem to have a similar lifespan to us today, maybe like a bit longer. I think like 2 centuries was mentioned at one point. But there are children, and this is the first time Alvin is seeing children. He's sort of blown away by children. They meet Alvin, and they're like, oh, hey, yeah, no, we're used to people coming from Diaspar, because it happens once every 100, 200, 300 million years, which I don't know how they would even have a history going back that far, even an oral tradition, how they would possibly remember that someone had come from Diaspar hundreds of millions of years ago. But anyways, so they tell Alvin, okay, yeah, we know about Diaspar, but we do not want anything to do with them. That we don't want them to know about us. We are two totally different societies, and we want to keep it that way, so you can't go back. Sorry, you have to stay here. And he's like, oh, okay. They give him an option. They say you can go back, but we'll erase your memories, and we'll erase anyone's memories in Diaspar that memories that know that you left. So no one will know that you left, and it will be like it never happened because they have telepathic powers and they can do this. So Alvin's like, okay, give me like a couple days to think it over. I want to go exploring. So he goes exploring, and he has as a guide this guy Hilvar, who was just his guide, but immediately becomes his like soulmate, but like platonically, and will like do anything for him and go anywhere for him, which I thought was just bizarre. But we'll get to that. So him and Hilvar, they go out hiking. They go to this place where there had been the last battle of humanity. And I forgot to explain it, but basically the history is that humanity had an empire spanning the galaxy. It was great, and then the invaders came and basically pushed humanity back to Earth. And at this last battle at this place, Shalmarain, humanity managed to hold on, and that's why Diaspar exists, because it was the only bastion of humanity that managed to survive the invaders' destruction of the human empire. So anyway, so they go to the ruins of Shalmarain. They meet this creature there that's like a composite of many different individuals. It's some sort of polyp-based jellyfish thing that when it's in its individual stage, it has no intelligence, but as it forms as one, it has sort of it's been around for over 1 billion years, and it has this robot companion that's looking after it. And Alvin convinces it to allow the robot to go with him, because this thing is waiting for the prophesied return of the Great Ones that this man had prophesied 1 billion years ago. And it turns out this man was just like a crazy person who was just spouting random stuff. But this weird alien biological experiment thing believes in him and has been waiting 1 billion years for this prophecy to come true. And so has this robot. So Alvin's like, well, hey, let me take the robot with me. Things have changed. You should sort of see the world, and we should spread the word. So the robot goes with him. See, and I know this sounds crazy, because it is crazy. It's just sort of out of the blue. I noticed Arthur C. Clarke seems to be very anti-religious. A lot of this book is sort of against religion and mocking religion. Anyway, so they find this creature. They convince the robot to go with him. They go back to Lys, and Alvin's like, okay, no, I'm actually going to go back to Diaspar, but you're not going to erase my memories, because I won't let you. And so they try to invade his mind, and this triggers the robot, whom he had told earlier that if this happens, grab me, run back to Diaspar, do not stop, do not take any orders from me or anyone else until that happens. So because of that failsafe, they invade his mind. I don't know why they don't just erase his memories, but they try and get him to stop, to order the robot to stop. The robot does not. The robot grabs him, carries him all the way back to Diaspar. And then he's back to Diaspar. So he goes and talks to the central computer, and the central computer's like, yes, this is why I created you. I can't tell you the main reason, but I created you for a purpose, and you brought this robot back, and this robot has memories from the before times, so let me just trick it and pretend the Great Ones came back, and okay, now the robot will tell you anything you need to know. So the robot shows him that there is a spaceship nearby, underground. It's been underground for like 1 billion years. So Alvin talks to the council, and he's like, hey, there's this other group of humanity out there called Lys. You should sort of reconcile with them. Like he told Lys, you should reconcile with Diaspar, the two communities. It's been 1 billion years. We should come back together and sort of rejoin and learn from each other and whatever. And you think, oh, okay, so this is how it ends. And then Alvin goes up. He manages to get the city to open a doorway to him so he can leave again. And the robot brings the spaceship up, and Alvin gets on the spaceship and flies away. And that's how it should have ended, was Alvin had sort of broken open the doors of Diaspar and had brought these two people together and started negotiations and relations that would eventually culminate in humanity sort of rejoining. And it's like, okay, they all live happily ever after. Should have ended, but there's still a third of the book left at this point. So Alvin goes back to Lise. He tells them, "Hey, I told Diaspar all about you guys. You guys should meet up and like start talking." And then he picks up Hilvar, his guide that he spent like a couple nights out in the wilderness with. And he's like, "Oh, hey Hilvar, we're gonna go. I'm gonna go travel interstellarly. We're gonna go to different stars and stuff." And Hilvar's like, "Yeah, sure, whatever. I guess I'll leave my family and my home and everything behind just to travel with this random person who's totally different, basically alien to me, that I met a few days ago. Sure, let's go travel the galaxy together." So they shoot off towards this like seven sun system that they could see in the night sky. It's like different color suns, and it's clearly artificial. So they're like, okay, whatever's out there, something's got to be there. So they go there. It's clearly an artificial system. The planets are all artificial, and they visit the planets one after another, and they find they're all either dead or like biologically overgrown, or like dangerous. Basically, there's no intelligence there whatsoever. But there are innumerable signs that intelligence had been there. So they're like, oh, we're too late. Something happened a billion years ago. Maybe it was the invaders that destroyed the human empire. What should we do? But then it turns out that because of the sort of the noise they made traveling interstellarly, which is apparently a word I'm using now, they notified or met this creature, this sort of eldritch intelligence space traveling thing called a Vanamond, finds them and is like, "Hey, what are you doing? I just noticed you." And it turns out this Vanamond thing was created by humans, and so having found new humans, it's kind of happy. It has sort of a childlike intelligence, but a very vast and deep intelligence, very powerful, whatever. So they're like, "Hey, we should go back to Earth. You should come with us, Vanamond." So they go back to Earth. And then Vanamond, it turns out, has knowledge of history a billion years back, and so the people of Lise start telepathically communicating with this thought being, and piecing together history. There's a meeting then between Lise and Diaspar, a big council meeting where they're like, "Okay, we're going to explain to you the real truth, because the history you knew was false. But now that we have this Vanamond, we can tell you what really happened." And it turns out that there was no such thing as this human galactic empire. There was no such thing as the invaders. Turns out humanity spread to the stars, but only did so because aliens came and gave them technology to do so. So humans bettered themselves genetically and achieved immortality, and with the help of other species, joined this sort of collective galactic spanning empire of a multiracial, multi-species coalition, whatever. And it was like great, everyone was happy. But then they were like, well, in order to really understand the universe, we're limited by our sense organs. Our worldview is going to be tainted by the fact that we are corporeal beings who can only interpret input sensorially. So they set out to create this an intelligence that was purely mental, purely thought based. And so they created this thing, and it was called the Mad Mind because it went mad and started destroying the galaxy. And it was only through the combined efforts and millions of years of effort that they managed to capture and keep this entity and lock it in this thing called the Black Sun, or the Black Star, or something like that, some prison that will eventually die, and this thing will be re-released. And that was sort of seen, that sort of was the basis for the myth of the invaders later on. But humanity still sort of struggled on for a bit, but then they still wanted to create these intelligences that were purely, that were incorporeal. And so they managed to create a number of them, and actually succeed this time, not have them be all crazy and destroy the universe. Vanamond is one of these, and there are some other ones out there. And then after they created these, the Empire, all these different species and people agreed that, okay, the universe is kind of messed up from the mad mind. We've created these new beings. Let's let them mature. We're going to leave the universe to another plane, maybe another galaxy. Maybe they just left somewhere. And when they left, they their ships were like the size of suns and moons and planets, and they basically a huge it was like a, what do they use the term, small, like the, no, not a whatever the term is for a small galaxy, a small grouping of stars and planets and stuff, like the Magellan Cloud or whatever. Anyways, so they just shot off and left, and that's why the universe seems to be dead. But there were some ultra conservatives who were fearful of change and fearful of the unknown, and so they stayed on Earth, founded Diaspar, created this sort of genetic psychological impulse to fear the unknown, rewrote their history, and basically set up Diaspar that managed to last for 1 billion years. And also the other ones stayed in Lice, or Lys, whatever. So they were the remnants who were too fearful to go with everyone else. So this is all explained, and then it's and then Alvin sends his spaceship out wherever to find the remnants of the Empire, find wherever they went, and let them know that there's still some people left, and hope they'll come back and whatever. And that's how it ends. Anyways, but like I said, that last third seemed to be all over the place. It should have just been left as a mystery of what the real history of the galaxy is and what really is out there in the universe, and the story should have been about Diaspar and Lice and the two different ways of being and the two different ways of organizing politically, and the two ways of philosophy of immortality and stagnation versus continual change and mortality, and the benefits and drawbacks from both of those, and then these two societies meeting and exchanging ideas and forming some sort of cohesive whole in the end that is better than the sum of the parts of the two. But no, there had to be the part when he goes off into space and sees what's out there, and then brings back this weird creature, and I don't know, maybe it was just because I don't know how it was published, but this was like a rewrite of his original book. I don't know if the original book was like a serial, like a pulp sort of serial where they tell different stories, episodic, because it kind of feels like the first 2/3 are like this one cohesive story, and then there's short episodes after, going to the planets, meeting Vanamon, bringing Vanamon back, meeting of the council, and then the explaining of the real history, and then wrapping up. I don't know. I think that's why it took me so long to get through, because it was and it's neat to read, and it's very much a product of its time, but it's neat to think about what people thought of technology and its science and its potential in the 1950s. Anyway, so that was The City in the Stars by Arthur C. Clarke.